Good morning. Welcome to the June session of the Daring to Learn webinar series. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Alaina Boyd. I am an extension assistant with the UT Center for Profitable Agriculture. This Daring to Learn webinar series is a monthly series that we hold on the second Tuesday of each month. Our topics change from month to month. We have different speakers touch on different things, and our session today is going to be covering e-commerce essentials, so just some very basic things related to e-commerce and some things to consider if you are starting an e-commerce business. So we will go ahead and get started. All right, so just a little bit about me. As I mentioned, my name is Alaina Boyd with the UT Center for Profitable Agriculture. My background is in this digital marketing space and in communication and information. So I am excited to talk with you guys about e-commerce today and move through some of this information with you. If you are not familiar with the Center for Profitable Agriculture is a department in UT Extension. We are a formal partnership between UT Extension and the Tennessee Farm Bureau. We also work pretty closely with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. And you may recognize some of these folks on the screen here. This is CPA's value added team. We have grown a little bit this year, so we added a new extension specialist earlier this spring, Liz Mooneyham, and we're excited to have her on the team with us. And just kind of a quick disclaimer as we start to move through some of this information about e-commerce. Everything we talk about today is just for educational purposes only. So keep that in mind. We're not endorsing any specific platform or anything like that. And just sort of an overview of some of the things that we will touch on in this session today include answering what is e-commerce, looking at those different types of e-commerce, and then some tips and tricks, or maybe more so things to consider if you are starting an e-commerce business. And just some quick housekeeping things before I move too deep into our slides. I see a couple more folks have joined. If you have a question at any time, feel free to stop me. You can use the chat function. There's also a Q&A option. You can raise your hand. If you have a question, there's a couple different ways that you can get that across to us. I'll try to answer those as we move through. Sometimes that discussion is really helpful and kind of adds to the conversation. So if you have a question, feel free to ask that. All right, so just starting off, very first thing here, what is e-commerce? You may be familiar with this term, you may have heard it in the past. Sometimes it can be used sort of as kind of a buzzword. So e-commerce is the process of buying and selling goods or services online, electronically, or using the internet. So this can take place a couple of different ways. Typically, we may see this done on a computer using a web browser or maybe a website. You can also use a mobile app, and there are some smart watches now. I know depending on the application with your Apple Watch, you can even purchase products using a smartwatch. So that's just a quick definition of e-commerce. And I share this next slide with you guys because I think it's kind of important to look at the history of e-commerce, because this concept of e-commerce is not necessarily new. It has changed pretty rapidly, even in just the last maybe 5 to 10 years. But the idea of using technology to push sales or make sales happen has been around for quite a long time. So you'll see on this slide here in 1969, that kind of blew my mind looking at the history of e-commerce. I guess I didn't realize that so far back into history, we were able to use technology to make sales happen. So in 1969, a company called CompuServe was founded, and this allowed for businesses to exchange data electronically through telephone wires. And then in 1976, online transaction processing became available. In 1979, the concept of electronic shopping was invented. In 1982, the very first e-commerce company was launched. So that was actually called Boston Computer Exchange, and it allowed people to buy computers online. And I think the craziest part just about this timeline or brief look at the history of e-commerce is that this concept of e-commerce existed before the World Wide Web was even launched. Because the World Wide Web that we're familiar with as kind of the internet now was not launched until 1990. So this process of e-commerce or using technology and electronics to shop has been around for quite a while. So we've looked a little bit at the history. We've defined or tied a definition to e-commerce already. And now I want us to take a look at what I've got on this slide here called the e-commerce ecosystem. So when we talk about e-commerce today, kind of in a modern setting, um, e-commerce exists in a very similar flow to a supply chain. If any of you have ever taken a look at maybe supply chain maps or taken a look at supply chain for specific businesses, our transactions or our purchases always have to start at the e-commerce platform. So whatever the customer, maybe you're the customer or a customer for your business is looking at purchasing a product, that has to start on that e-commerce platform, whether that's an app, a website, you're selling through another platform like Amazon, all that has to start somewhere. And then the customers will utilize some form of point of sale to make that purchase, and then the funds will transfer from the customer to the business's end. And from point of sale, then we move towards logistics and delivery. So if you are considering selling a product online and you're going to ship that, then that would fall into your logistics and delivery. Maybe you are looking at having an e-commerce platform, but you're going to have people pick up products in person rather than purchase online. That all those logistics will fall into that bucket. And then lastly, this support and service category we have over towards the end. That support and service is going to be all the activities that relate to um, the e-commerce after the product has been put in the customer's hands. So depending on what goods or services you sell, you may have some sort of support or service available to your customers after the fact. Um, Maybe if you're using Amazon or another kind of application to sell online, then there's support and service available to customers at that point. So this is just a quick look at that e-commerce ecosystem. On this next slide, I wanted to kind of discuss with you all some variations to e-commerce. And there are a couple of variations floating around online that you may be familiar with. Maybe you have even seen this idea of m-commerce in the past. So I've talked a little bit about Amazon already. Amazon is a great example of that m-commerce model of e-commerce. So rather than using the E for electronic, m-commerce refers to any kind of platform or service that's using a mobile device for that e-commerce to take place. So using an M for mobile rather than just the E for electronic. But m-commerce is just a subset of e-commerce. And it's very possible that you may run into e-commerce platforms or companies that may or may not call themselves an m-commerce solution, but like Amazon, they may have an app or run strictly on a mobile device rather than a website. So kind of keep that variation in mind. Even though it's using a mobile device or a smartphone, it still exists as a form of e-commerce. All right. So we've talked about a couple of definitions for e-commerce. We've taken a look at that e-commerce ecosystem, but you may still be wondering, why would I use e-commerce at all? Well, we are in a technology-driven world. I think you would be hard-pressed these days to find at least one person who has never purchased a product or a service at some point in their life using some form of e-commerce, whether that's through their phone, through social media, um, using a computer, that sort of thing. It can be very difficult, I think, to get away from the idea of e-commerce, and I think it would be detrimental to especially farm businesses that are starting or growing to not jump on the chance to utilize e-commerce. Um, E-commerce allows you to generate new revenue and sales that you may have otherwise not gotten through traditional direct-to-consumer or in-person shopping. There are a lot of folks who maybe they can't shop in person for whatever reason, but they can shop online or they can use e-commerce. So that helps you just capture more of that consumer dollar that you may not find elsewhere. E-commerce can also attract new customers to your business, just like I mentioned, that you may never encounter elsewhere. For whatever reason, there may be customers that can't come in person to maybe your farm stand, or if you're selling at a farmer's market or in a local retail store. Um, but e-commerce also helps you expand the reach of your product to other communities outside of your region, outside of your state, even outside of your country. There are folks from around the world that can purchase your products if you'd be willing to ship to them. So there's really not necessarily a limit to the amount of growth potential that e-commerce can bring to your business. On these next couple of slides, we'll look at some basic considerations for starting an e-commerce enterprise. And these are very similar, especially on this first slide, to basic considerations for starting any kind of new business. If you've listened to a marketing presentation or been in some of our CPA workshops before, you've probably heard us say over and over and over again how important it is to know your product and know your target audience. And I would say more important to know your target audience over anything else. So when you're considering starting an e-commerce enterprise, one of the first things that you would really want to do is make sure you identify those products or services that you're going to offer on that e-commerce site. And then know your target audience for those products. And we talked a little bit in the previous slide about how you may be able to target a completely different set of customers than maybe you get in person using e-commerce. So you may have to tweak your target audience just a little with starting an e-commerce site. And also um, where with kind of traditional direct-to-consumer sales, you may have to figure out where you're going to sell your product. With e-commerce, you have to pick or determine the e-commerce platform that you're going to use. And we'll look at a couple different options here in a few slides further in the presentation. But making sure that you choose a platform that works for you is very important. And just a couple more considerations if you're thinking about starting an e-commerce enterprise. So once you have those initial details sorted of, you know what you're going to sell, you know the platform you're going to use, and you have a target audience in mind, then you can start to think on some of these maybe finer details or nittier grittier sort of things. Um, so I think one other major consideration that you'd want to think about, how are you going to get those products to the customers that are buying from you online? Are you going to ship those? Would you deliver those? Would they be able to pick up in store? Maybe you have an operation or kind of a retail place on the farm that folks can pick up from. So just thinking about the logistics and the delivery behind the e-commerce portion of the business is important. Also, how will folks pay for that product? We'll talk pretty heavily here in several slides about payment options open to you for e-commerce. Those are changing, I think, I would consider pretty rapidly. There are new payment options for folks all the time. We'll take a look at those in depth here in just a few slides. And also one last thing to think about, will you be solely e-commerce or will you also offer in-person sales? I know several folks who um, maybe they're selling soaps and lotions and they have online sales through an e-commerce website, but then they also still maintain that farm stand on the property so folks can come to the farm and purchase directly from them. So that's something to consider if you want to handle the upkeep of both an online and an in-person store, or if you just want to run an e-commerce business. All right. So keeping all of those basic considerations of e-commerce in mind that we've already talked about, I want to talk with you over these next few slides about some specific examples of what e-commerce can look like. And there are a lot of acronyms or types of e-commerce floating around on the internet. This is definitely not a definitive list. There are, I think, more acronyms than just these that I have listed up here. But I think this list can be important in helping you identify some major e-commerce options available to you as you get started. And some of them may not apply for every single business. I think it depends on the product or the service. But we'll start up top with social selling. So if you did not know, you can now sell products directly through Facebook and Instagram. We've talked in previous Daring to Learn sessions about Meta Business Suite, and Meta, that's the company that owns Facebook and Instagram. Meta has what they call Meta Shops, and you can now sell products and have a store tied to your business page through Facebook and Instagram. There's also C2C or consumer to consumer e-commerce. I think the most popular or kind of household name option for that C2C would be eBay. So eBay is an option. Business to business, that's going to be B2B sales. So that would be if you've got a product or a service that you're selling to other businesses. Typically, that's not going to be some kind of a consumer product. Maybe you have some sort of a solution for other businesses, and then you would just market that product and sell to them rather than consumer to business. Business to government is also an e-commerce option. I think that surprised me. I think maybe in our agriculture community or in the ag world, we don't necessarily think about that as often. But there may be goods or services that you can provide to local governments or county governments through some sort of an e-commerce setup. Online marketplaces, I've mentioned Amazon a couple times already. There are other online marketplaces for e-commerce sales to happen besides Amazon. Etsy is another one that we'll talk about. But I think Amazon is kind of the biggest name that jumps out at folks when they're thinking about using an online marketplace. And lastly, we would have direct to consumer or brand websites for e-commerce. So this situation would be where you create your own website for your farm or for your business, and you are engaging in direct-to-consumer sales through that e-commerce platform. And we'll look at some specific examples of um, direct-to-consumer websites here in a few slides. So I've got some more examples from some of these that we talked about. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these just because we will do a deep dive, I think, in future sessions, especially on the concept of meta shops. But you do have to have a Facebook and an Instagram business profile to use meta shops. And here's an example of what that might look like. If you chose the Meta Shops route for social selling as an e-commerce solution, you can use those for both Facebook and Instagram. Like I mentioned, there's, I think, some flexibility there. You can kind of match it to the branding on your Facebook and your Instagram accounts, and folks can buy directly from those two platforms. We talked about Amazon a couple times already as an option for an online marketplace. If you do decide to sell with Amazon, there are lots of small businesses and farm businesses that sell with Amazon, and I think have found great success doing that. I'm most familiar with folks selling soaps and lotions or other similar kind of cosmetic products through Amazon, but depending on your location or where you're at, there are folks who can even sell maybe more perishable types of goods rather than maybe non-perishable items. So Amazon is something to consider, especially now with their partnership with Whole Foods. If you're thinking about maybe getting into the retail arena, in addition to e-commerce, Amazon may be one to consider. An alternative to Amazon as an online marketplace, one of the alternatives that I like to suggest to producers is Etsy. So you may have seen Etsy before, you may have even shopped with them. I would consider Etsy a smaller competitor to Amazon in terms of online marketplaces for e-commerce. There are folks from jewelers to florists to folks that work with leather. So lots of soaps and lotions sold on Etsy, lots of other handmade products. Etsy tends to be more of sort of an artsy community. So if Amazon is not necessarily one that fits the values or the mission for your farm or your business, Etsy may be one to consider. There are, I think, similar with Amazon, possibly fees tied to the using those marketplaces because you do have to pay to use that service, but that is an option to consider. And then I also mentioned using websites or building a website yourself for direct-to-consumer sales. This example that I've got up here on the screen is a company called Backyard Butchers. I was not familiar with them until I started putting this slide set together, and I was trying to find some really nice ag-related websites to share with you all. Coincidentally, this is actually a Shopify website, and we'll talk a little bit about Shopify later on in the session. But this is just one example of building a website and being able to use that e-commerce solution for direct-to-consumer sales. So I will kind of bring this up, some things to consider if you decide to go the DIY or website builder route for your e-commerce platform. Uh, there are a lot of website building options available to you. These are all at different price points. With some sites, depending on a couple things, you can create a website totally for free. Regardless of the website builder or service that you use, whether that's GoDaddy, Wix, Weebly, WordPress, there are basic things that you want to consider when you start to create that website. So I think the very first one would to be choose a domain name or a URL for your online store. If possible, I would try to choose one that is similar to maybe your farm name or if the existing farm business, if you want that to tie in together. I think it makes sense for the name to match. You wouldn't necessarily want your domain name or URL to be something that doesn't make sense for producers or for your customers, excuse me, because they may not remember. And new folks that come across you, maybe they just see that domain name or that URL linked on social media. They may be confused if it doesn't tie back to the farm or your brand. You're also going to want to decide on essential web pages for that website that you're putting together. You can have a very successful DIY built website with only just a few pages, even an e-commerce website. So really maybe a home page, an about page, your contact page, and then the shop page where customers would move through and add products to their cart and purchase. Um, you don't have to have, 15 or 20 pages on your website um, to be able to have an effective e-commerce site. And one other thing I think this is very important to consider is to incorporate the existing branding, colors, logos, that sort of thing. If you already have a brand image or a brand kit completed for your farm business, I would encourage you to use that in the website that you're putting together. With a lot of these website builders now, you have a lot of flexibility to choose different themes. You can change colors, you can incorporate your logo that already exists. So just because you're starting from scratch and building a website on your own does not mean you necessarily have to lose any of the branding that you've already put together. I think this can continue to help things look consistent across all of your digital spaces, whether that's social media and your e-commerce website. So just remember to incorporate that existing branding if you have it. One other thing I want to mention, um, just because you create a website or an e-commerce profile and it gets put on the internet, that does not mean that people will automatically find it. We're not going to talk very deeply at all about search engine optimization or optimizing websites in this session at all. We have other Daring to Learn recordings that talk about those two things, but keep that in mind. Just because you create a website and throw it out on the internet does not mean that people will automatically find it. You might have a few customers that stumble onto the site, but as a general rule of thumb, if you don't do any marketing or if you have very minimal marketing for your e-commerce platform or website, then you're probably going to have very minimal or no growth in your sales or your revenue. Um, you can't typically generate sales without putting in any kind of marketing effort. So keep that in mind. If you go through all the effort of creating a website or an e-commerce profile, whether that's on Amazon or Etsy, or you build a website yourself, um, I would strongly encourage you to do yourself a favor and link that back to any of your existing social media accounts. If you do any in-person marketing or advertising anywhere in the community, make sure that you include that URL or a way for your customers to get to that website after you go through the effort of creating it. That will just help you out in the long run and help more customers find you online. So really quickly, we will move through a couple of DIY web design tools that are available to you all online. Wix is a really nice one. I have built a couple of Wix sites in the past. Like most drag and drop website builders these days, there are lots of templates that you can use. You can make that website your own. There are a couple of other plugins or things you can add to that Wix site. So you're not necessarily tied to just all of their services necessarily, but Wix is one option. Squarespace is another. Maybe you've seen the Squarespace commercials on TV or online. I would consider Squarespace one of the newer DIY or drag and drop website builder options. This I don't think has been around as many years as maybe some of the other options that we'll talk about. I am very, very impressed with Squarespace's templates. Um, it's just as easy, I think, to move through Squarespace as it is through some of the other drag and drop builders. I would encourage you to look into them if you have not already. Um, you can see with this screenshot here just some examples of some of their templates. It's looks very clean. It looks very modern. Like I said, I'm very impressed. But all of these examples that I'll talk with you guys about are great options. One other DIY website design tool you may have heard of in the past is Shopify. So I would consider Shopify a big name in e-commerce. There are several Shopify things we'll talk about before we get to the end of this session. Just like the other two websites that we mentioned, Shopify has their own drag and drop website editor. They have lots of templates available. The cool thing with Shopify is you can still build a website with them and not have to use any of their other e-commerce options. Where if you use Wix or WordPress or Weebly, that sort of thing, you can integrate in the point of sale or payment options for Shopify into those other websites. You can just use Shopify as a website builder and not necessarily have to utilize their payment processing. Now, the downside for that, I mentioned you can use Shopify payments on other sites. If you decide to build a Shopify website, you will have to use their native point of sale or payment processing. So you're not tied to using the Shopify for payments on other websites, but you are if you use Shopify to build your website. So I mentioned Shopify is, I would almost argue, maybe the largest e-commerce platform available pretty readily to small businesses or businesses of any size. You may not know this, there are lots of big brand names that use Shopify to build their website. So if you decide to go this route, just know there are lots of other really big successful brands that like Shopify well enough, they use that e-commerce option as their platform. I've got a little look at some of the pricing for Shopify on this screen. When you guys get these set of slides at the end of the session, I've got links for everything that I've got in here, so you'll be able to dig a little deeper as you move through. I talked a little bit about Shopify integrations already, so you can use the Shopify buy button with a Wix website, Weebly, WordPress, Squarespace. For those of you who are maybe a little computer or website savvy, maybe you are interested in building a website using code editing, you can do lots of fun code things with Shopify, but the nice thing with the Shopify buy button, you can embed with using JavaScript, you can embed that Shopify buy button into any website, not just these listed up here, using just a little bit of code. And some of these website builders these days make code editing a little easier. It's not necessarily as scary as it sounds. So making these Shopify integrations happen. They're working to make that, I think, as seamless as they can for especially for small businesses. All right. So we've talked a little bit about Shopify as a e-commerce platform, Shopify as a website builder. You may have seen in the past Shop Pay. So I want to kind of bring this to your attention that Shopify and Shop Pay are two different things. They are both part of Shopify's e-commerce solutions, but Shop Pay is going to be that native payment processing solution used for Shopify stores. I mentioned this earlier. You cannot use Shop Pay if you do not have a Shopify online store, but you can use the Shopify website builder and not use Shop Pay, if that makes sense. So you don't necessarily have to make a Shopify website to sell anything. But if you do decide to use the e-commerce portion of that website, you will have to use Shop Pay as the payment processing. So this slide is just a quick look again at Shopify versus Shop Pay. If you guys have purchased anything online, especially from, I see this a lot with boutiques, or even I have some examples at the end of this slide set. I ordered meat from a farmer that we work with, and he uses a Shopify website. And obviously, because of that, his checkout process uses Shop Pay. So we'll be able to look at kind of some screenshots walking us through that Shop Pay process before we get finished with these slides. And I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about payment options. And I mentioned that payment options for e-commerce, I think, are changing all the time and growing. Some of you may be familiar with those point of sale or physical payment options like Clover or Square. My parents have a farm business. They have used both Clover and Square in the past. They currently use Clover now for their checkout process. They're able to do digital payments, card payments, that kind of thing. So we still have our point of sale or physical payment options for e-commerce. Other payment options include, as we mentioned, Shopify and Shop Pay, Apple Pay, or Samsung Pay. I think they have Android Pay also. Any of those mobile pay options, that's going to allow customers to pay for things using either that Apple Wallet, that Android Wallet. That's just a way for them to add their card information basically to their phone and then pay with the phone. Recurring subscriptions are also considered a payment option for e-commerce platforms. That may look different for every person depending on the website or e-commerce that you use. I know some folks using WordPress, they use WooCommerce, and you're able to set up subscriptions differently just depending on the site that you use. And the last one that I'll mention is what we call buy now, pay later payment options. You may or may not be familiar with these. If you've ever shopped with a firm, you can use a firm through Walmart, Amazon. I know you can use Afterpay in a lot of stores like Ulta, that sort of thing. I've used both of these in the past. This is just a way for customers to basically pay for the product using that Affirm or Afterpay service, and it's going to give them a virtual card or like a debit card number. And then if they choose to use the buy now, pay later service, then that's basically a lender that gives the customer money, and then the payment still goes to you as the business, but that's just another option. I think that's becoming more and more popular with e-commerce. And this last slide, again, we talked a little bit about point of sale and payments. There's Square, which is, I think, a big competitor for Clover. Square is, I think, also starting to become a competitor for Shopify as an e-commerce platform. This next slide sort of shows us a little bit in depth of a look between using Shopify versus the Square point of sale hardware. So you can see here there's a monthly membership fee for using Shopify. That point of sale cost ranges anywhere from being free to up to $89 a month. I've talked with a producer in the past. She was using Shopify, and I think her fee was $89 a month to keep her online store operational. Where with the Square point of sale, that costs just to be using that service is anywhere from free to up to $29 a month or more. Then there are additional add-ons through Square. You can see that email marketing, text message marketing, loyalty programs, payroll, that sort of thing. Um, we've got a breakdown of transaction fees for Shopify versus Square here, as well as just some other helpful tidbits of Shopify versus Square. So you can see the tap and the chip reader for Shopify, where just the mobile strip reader and that contactless chip reader and tap to pay is just going to be available for brick and mortar stores using Square. So if you're considering a point of sale hardware, you may want to opt for Shopify instead of Square, especially if you don't necessarily have a brick and mortar store option. All right. And we're getting close to the end here. Keep in mind, this session is sort of just focusing on those e-commerce essentials. So I'm not necessarily doing a deep dive into any one particular thing. But these next few slides, we're going to move through looking at what an online store built through Shopify using Shop Pay might look like and what that checkout process might look like. So these are screenshots from where I purchased from a producer recently. This is that online store there. So just little screenshots from the homepage that you'd land on. Of course, you can see they got their logo and your typical website headers up here and things to click through. And then this is what the products look like after they add pictures. And the Shop Pay checkout process, I think, is fairly straightforward. I trust you've all shopped online before. You just add your items to cart. When you get ready, you click checkout. And the neat thing with Shop Pay is it's always going to look something like this. So you will have on the right-hand side of the screen your running total with all the products in the customer's cart. There's an option for them to add a discount code, that sort of thing. And then they would fill in their contact information here. So you see the Shop Pay button. If your customer has an account with your Shopify business, or they have just an account with Shop Pay in general. I know I shop at a lot of stores that use Shop Pay, so my contact information and my card information is saved to my Shop Pay account. So anytime I shop with a store online that uses Shop Pay, it'll send me like a verification code, and then it will autofill my contact information in. But the checkout process, like I said, pretty straightforward, looks like this. And after your customer places that order, they'll get a confirmation page that looks like this on the screen. And again, on the right-hand side, they'll have this total of everything they purchased. It'll show if they used a coupon code or how much they saved, that sort of thing. Typically, if you are delivering or will be delivering that product to that customer, their address will show up here. Now, with this particular order, I chose to pick up in store. So nothing is being shipped to me from this particular farm. But if it was, this is where all that shipping information would pop up. And then, of course, you see I've got a confirmation number. It says, "Thank you, Alaina," that sort of thing. A lot of that is kind of pre-built based on the customer information, which I think is pretty helpful because you don't have to spend a lot of time sending out a confirmation email. It just does that for you. And lastly, taking a quick look at just order confirmations. So these are screenshots from emails that I got after I placed my order with this farm. So you see, I got this email with the heading, order number, blah, 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 confirmed. And you see it came from Tennessee Grass-Fed, but then it's a store with lots of numbers at shopifyemail.com. So that's an auto-generated email that came from the Shopify store. And then there's this nice little message with my order number at the top. It says they're getting my order ready. There's important information for picking up, uh, non-farm store pickup orders versus local delivery options. So they were able to pre-write that message, the folks at Tennessee Grassfed, and that shows up with every confirmation email after customers make a purchase. And notice also, I don't think I mentioned this, their logo is very prominently displayed on everything that I got. My confirmation, this copy of the confirmation email. So very easy to incorporate that logo and branding into the confirmation emails that you send your customers using ShopPay. One last thing that I'll mention with ShopPay is customer accounts. So I talked about that already, how my information is automatically pulled because I have a ShopPay account. I also made a customer account with Tennessee Grassfed. So this is an option that you can offer if you decide to go with Shopify as your e-commerce solution. You can give your customers a opportunity to make a customer account so that way they can log back in with their email and password, their contact information, their delivery information, possibly their payment information is saved on there. So that just saves them a lot of time when they go back to repurchase. It makes things easier on the customer end and on your end as well because it's stored there. All right, so we talked really heavily about Shopify, and I promise I don't get any kickbacks at all for talking about them. They are just what I would consider one of the largest e-commerce platforms available for folks. There's a lot of information out there on how to use them, and I think they are a very friendly option for small businesses. But if Shopify is not your jam, and you are just not a fan of the shop pay checkout process that we looked at, or any of some of the other Shopify things that maybe we talked about earlier in this session, there are Shopify alternatives. So there are lots of alternatives for e-commerce solutions that we mentioned. Squarespace is one that we've already talked about. Wix is really good, especially for small businesses. Square is typically for in-person businesses. I think that's the downside to using Square as a company, because if you want to jump on the e-commerce train, Square really limits you in what you can do or what you can offer. WooCommerce, that is the online store and e-commerce option for WordPress websites. But like we mentioned earlier, just because you have a WordPress website does not mean that you're limited to just WooCommerce. You can add in Shopify or other things to those sites. Ecwid, that's the one that I'm not very familiar with. They are advertised as a free e-commerce platform, and then they have a plan of up to $19 a month for more professional features. And big commerce is another, that's going to be for your very large volume sellers. Um, so this is just a rundown of Shopify alternatives that are available out there to you all. I would encourage you to do your research because, like I said, any of the information that I shared with you guys today, this is not the end all be all list. This is not the definitive list of options. You may be able to find alternatives to even this list that work for you if maybe you've had experience with some of these in the past and it didn't work out. So don't feel like you have to be tied to Shopify or some of these other big names for your e-commerce solutions. There are other ways to have an e-commerce platform, like we mentioned, whether that's going to be social selling, using online marketing places, that sort of thing, rather than just a website. And as we kind of start to wrap up here, I know we're getting short on time. There are some additional resources that I wanted to share with you guys again. And I apologize, this is another Shopify resource, but I think it is so beneficial to share with you all. Shopify has a blog, as most, I think, services do now. Blogs are an opportunity to share more information with customers and offer solutions to challenges or problems that they're facing. and the Shopify starting up section of their blog, I think, is immensely helpful, especially for small businesses trying to move into e-commerce. They also have a find an idea page. They have marketing specific resources. If you just want to see other Shopify websites that have been built out, um, they have a page where you can move through built websites from other brands to get ideas from. And the interesting thing with Shopify, some of these stores I had no idea were using a Shopify website until I got to the checkout stage and they were using Shop Pay. So don't feel like you're limited at all, or that, oh, this is going to look like a pre-built website. I would say really the sky's the limit with a lot of these website editors. The drag and drop editors have come a long way, such a long way, even in just the last, 5 to 10 years, that you can have very sleek, modern, professional looking websites that you have built yourself, without spending a lot of money paying a marketing firm to do that. So I would strongly consider leaning on that Shopify starting up resource, especially if you're considering using Shopify or using a direct to consumer website for your e-commerce solution. So we have talked about a lot of things in this session. If any of you have any questions, feel free. We have a couple minutes left. I'd be happy to go back to something to talk a little bit about some things more in depth. I know this was kind of a high level on a lot of things. I wanted this to be sort of an as essential overview as I could keep it, without digging down into too many specific things. So if you have questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. If not, here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. My email is on there, as well as my direct phone line, and the social media accounts for the center are also listed there. If any of the folks on the call are needing TAEP credit or Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program educational credit, um, this attendance and evaluation form is how I keep up with that for you all. So if you're unfamiliar, um, watching up to 5 Daring to Learn sessions in a given year will qualify you for one producer diversification TAEP credit. That's for my Tennessee-based producers who are going to be applying for the Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program. It is for application B, not for application A. But also, if you don't need TAEP credit, feel free to still fill out the evaluation anyway. It's helpful for us to know whether we're on track with these sessions, if we missed something, or if you have any suggestions for other things that you'd like to see. Feel free to share that in this evaluation form. I will stick around for a couple more minutes. I know there are a few of you left on the call, so feel free, if you have any questions, we can talk through those. If not, um, our next session will be in July, and we'll be going through that market ready core training.